The African Union Summit's final statement condemns Israel's war on Gaza, accusing it of committing genocide against Palestinians. The Lebanese Ministry of Health condemns the kidnapping of 2 paramedics by the Israeli occupation forces. And France will host a European Leaders Summit on the Ukraine war and regional security. Hello there, good evening. It's 8 o'clock Cairo local time and you're watching Q News. We begin tonight's bulletin with the latest from the African Summit on Gaza. The final statement of the African Summit strongly condemned the Israeli war and brutal aggression against the Gaza Strip, highlighting Israel's commission of genocide against the Palestinians. The statement affirmed the African country's rejection of Israel's violations of international law and its targeting of civilians and infrastructure. It called for the suspension and cooperation and normalization with Israel until it ends its occupation and aggression against Palestine.
Supporters to disarm and withdraw from the Goma airport and other occupied territories. Thank you. I can take some few questions.
Thank you very much.
New escalation should not become an open conflict that will disrupt and impact on humanitarian activities and the already.
Now we cross to some breaking news. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is delivering a speech. Let's see that now.
For all these reasons, I think that these are important days for the Jewish state and the Jewish people. The Jewish people have come since the war began, under terrific anti-Semitic attacks. Those attacks typically escalate historically, as my father has taught me. They typically escalate historically in those moments when the Jews are perceived as weak. And they go down very quickly when the Jewish people is perceived as strong. We were perceived, perhaps, wrongly by our enemies as weak and as ready for the slaughter. But I think today everybody recognizes that Israel has never been as strong as it is now. The American-Israeli alliance has never been as strong as it is now. And the Jewish people have never been as strong as they are now. And that strength is based on our partnership. It's based on the resolve of our people. It's based in our belief in our great traditions. It's based on our faith in our past, in the future as well. And I think that together, greatest days are still before us. So I hope that next time that we meet, come back next year, you'll see the difference, even greater differences than you see now. I look forward to your next 50 years. Thank you, friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Shift a little bit to your right, and I'll leave this one. Thank you very much. Thank you once again for joining us.
Israeli Prime Minister there, Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking in occupied Jerusalem. Now, Egypt and Jordan have condemned escalations in the West Bank and reaffirmed support for a two-state solution. That came as Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met with Jordan's Crown Prince Hussein, who conveyed King Abdullah II's greetings. Discussions focused on strengthening bilateral ties and regional stability, particularly in Palestine. President Sisi and Crown Prince Hussein emphasized Egypt's role in securing the Gaza ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and reconstruction without displacement. The meeting also addressed Syria's unity and stability. Jordan's King Abdullah II has reaffirmed that a just and comprehensive peace based on the two-state solution is essential for regional security and stability. Those remarks were said to a U.S. congressional delegation, where Jordan's King Abdullah II reiterated his country's firm rejection of any attempts to annex land or displace Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. Jordan's king also urged sustained ceasefire efforts in Gaza and stronger international humanitarian responses. Israel has received a shipment of 1,800 heavy Mk-84 bombs from the United States after U.S. President Donald Trump lifted a block imposed on the munitions by the previous administration of President Joe Biden. The Mk-84 is an unguided 2,000-pound bomb that the Biden administration declined to clear for export to Israel out of concern over its likely effect in hitting densely populated areas in the Gaza Strip. The Biden administration sent thousands of 2,000-pound bombs to Israel after October 7, 2023, but had put a hold on one shipment. The hold was lifted by Trump last month. Palestinians in Rafah have condemned the American weapons supplies sent to Israel. Rafah residents said the U.S. has always supported Israel against the Palestinian people. Israel received Mk-84 bombs from the U.S. after President Trump lifted an export block imposed by former President Biden. The 2,000-pound bomb can penetrate concrete and metal with a wide blast radius. Washington has pledged billions in aid to Israel since the war began. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have held talks in occupied Jerusalem. In a press conference, Netanyahu has said Trump is the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. Netanyahu said he discussed with Rubio the bold vision of Trump for Gaza's future, adding that he and Trump are working in full cooperation and coordination on the situation in Gaza. The visit marks Rubio's first visit to the region as the U.S. Secretary of State. The health ministry in Gaza has reported an extremely severe oxygen shortage in the territory's main hospitals, saying it is affecting intensive care and other crucial operations and emergencies. The ministry has said Israeli attacks on Gaza hospitals, including Al-Shifa, Al-Rantisi, and Nasser Medical Complex, have destroyed 10 oxygen stations vital for intensive care, surgery, and emergency units. It added the blockade on oxygen supplies threatens patients' lives. The health ministry urges international bodies to provide and ensure the entry of oxygen stations into Gaza. Now, for more on this, we cross over to our newsroom where Rehan Morsi is there for us. Rehan.
Thank you so much, Mark. To help us analyse the situation on the ground, we're now joined from Cairo by Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor Khaled Dawood. Thank you so much for joining us here on Qnews. Sir, firstly, thank you so much for joining us. Firstly, let's start off with Egypt's President Sisi and Prince Hussein of Jordan, both stressing the urgency of halting the Palestinian displacement. How effective do you think or believe that Egypt's proposed reconstruction plans will be in alleviating not just the suffering of the Palestinian people, but preventing further displacement of them?
Well, thank you, Rehan, for having me again. Again, I think this is the key point. It's not just about providing the urgently needed humanitarian assistance for the Palestinian people in Gaza, but also the construction material and whatever Palestinians would need to make sure that they would not face this horrible scenario of forced displacement as suggested by the U.S. President Donald Trump. So again, that's going to be a very important statement from not just Egypt, but all Arab countries involved in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, that they do not approve such a plan presented by Mr. Trump because it does actually ignore their most basic demand, which is the right to self-determination and to have their own independent state. So again, that's a very important step that Egypt needs to coordinate with Jordan, with Saudi Arabia, with United Arab Emirates, and all key Arab countries that are supposed to be close to the United States, so that again, ahead of the Arab Summit, which Cairo plans to host on 27th of February, there will be at least understandings on the alternative plan to what Mr. Trump has proposed, so that it can be approved by the Arab leaders, particularly that Mr. Trump seems to be pretty serious about this proposal, and he keeps on repeating it all the time, as well as his top aides, who said that if you don't like the Trump proposal of forcibly displacing Palestinians and moving them to Egypt and Jordan, then you have to present your own alternative and plan, and
Yes.
I think this is what Egypt is working on.
Well, sir, as you said, coordination here is key. So the Jordanian Crown Prince reaffirmed support for Egypt's Gaza reconstruction plans. How do you see Jordan's role when it comes to complementing the reconstruction efforts and stabilizing the Gaza Strip and the region as a whole?
Well, we have, historically, Egypt and Jordan, along with, Lebanon and Syria, have been bordering Israel. These four countries have been, the mostly affected by the Palestinian issue, considering that they have joint borders with Palestine. And particularly, Jordan received millions of Palestinians who were forced to flee their homeland in 1948. And, the Palestinians, they make a large portion of the Jordanian population. So both, that's from the Jordanian side, from the Egyptian side, we've always been involved in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We've had our own wars with Israel since 1948 until 1973. And so, again, Egypt is heavily involved together with Jordan in determining the future of the Palestinian issue. And they were the two countries that were namely mentioned by the U.S. President Donald Trump as the possible destination for the Palestinian refugees for the Palestinians he wants to remove from Gaza, so that he can carry out his alleged reconstruction plan that would turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, according to Mr. Trump. And again, when Egypt and Jordan say that this plan by Mr. Trump is going to cause more complications and, if not regional instability, that's an important message that comes out from both Egypt and Jordan, because now they are the two Arab countries, along with Saudi, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, who are going to present a united Arab stand to the U.S. president and the alternative plan for his proposal to remove the Palestinians. So
Yes.
Egypt and Jordan in particular are the two most countries directly involved in the current efforts because of Mr. Trump's statements and his absurd proposal to allot a piece of land in Egypt and a piece of land in Jordan to take in the Gaza residents instead of working on the original peace plan aimed at creating a Palestinian state.
Well, sir, obviously the displacement issue is one of the top items in the agenda, but also continuing on to the second phase of the ceasefire is something that's important. So in your view, with Secretary of State Mark Rubio now in Tel Aviv, do you think that he may have pressured the Israelis to engage in negotiations for the second phase of the ceasefire during this visit? Or was this not part of his agenda in the visit?
Now, of course, it's an important part of his visit. Despite all the rhetoric and the threats that are being made by U.S. President Donald Trump, everybody has listened to the U.S. president saying that if Hamas did not release all the Israeli hostages they hold by Saturday noon, all hell will break loose. But then, practically speaking, the Israelis, along with mediating partners, Qatar and Egypt, who are working on the ground, they recognize that, again, if Israel is serious about its desire to see the hostages being released, negotiations and the implementation of the ceasefire agreement that was negotiated by the Americans along with the Egyptians and the Qataris must be implemented, including the 3 stages of the ceasefire deal. Of course, right now, after Trump came into office, Mr. Netanyahu and his cabinet, they feel very much emboldened and strengthened by the biased stand that Mr. Trump has adopted towards this conflict. But nevertheless, at least so far, based on the statements made by Secretary Rubio and Mr. Trump's Middle East peace envoy, Mr. Steve Witkoff, they are serious about the desire to work on
move on to the second phase.
Second stage.
Yes. So unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment. Thank you so much for joining us from Cairo. That was Al Ahram Weekly Managing Editor Khaled Dawood. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News. And now we move back to you, Mark, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Reham. Thank you much indeed. Drone footage has shown the extent of the destruction in Jabalia city in northern Gaza after 16 months of Israeli bombardments and ground offensives. The Israeli army launched several operations in Jabalia during the war that started in, of course, October 2023. The fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, meanwhile, remains intact after a major dispute threatened to unravel it last week. Now let's get the latest developments on Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بيخوف.
The Lebanese Ministry of Health has condemned the kidnapping of 2 paramedics by the Israeli occupation forces. The Lebanese Ministry of Health considered this act a flagrant violation of international and humanitarian laws which protect medical and ambulance crews while performing their duty. The Lebanese Ministry of Health demanded the immediate release of the kidnapped paramedics, calling for providing the necessary protection for medical and ambulance crews while performing their duties. Egypt has reaffirmed its full support for the new Lebanese government. Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration, Badr Abdel Ati, congratulated Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam on the formation of Lebanon's new government and expressed Egypt's full support for Lebanon's government and national institutions, emphasizing respect for its sovereignty. Abdel Ati reiterated Egypt's support for the full Israeli withdrawal from southern Lebanon and the enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, calling for an end to all violations of Lebanese sovereignty. Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem has reiterated that the Lebanese people have the right to confront Israeli aggression. He emphasized that there are no justifications or excuses for the Israeli occupation to remain in southern Lebanon. He asserted that political genocide is not feasible with the Palestinians. He also criticized President Donald Trump's positions on the Palestinian cause, describing them as dangerous and amounting to political genocide. Now let's get the latest developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia now then, and the Kremlin has said that the significance of the phone call between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump was that now Russia and the United States would speak about peace and not conflict. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the first meeting between Putin and Trump had a special significance given current circumstances, adding that the Western sanctions would not prevent Russia-US talks as they could be lifted as quickly as imposed. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said a draft minerals deal with Washington did not contain the security provisions that Kyiv needed. When asked by reporters about the issue with the US document, Zelensky said it is not in Ukraine's interest today and not in the interest of a sovereign Ukraine. He described it as an investment, suggesting it's possible to think about how to distribute profits from it if it is linked to security guarantees. However, he added that he has not yet seen the connection in the document. France has said it would host a summit of European leaders tomorrow to discuss the Ukraine war and European security. Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot spoke a day after US President Donald Trump's special Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg jolted Europe by saying it would not have a seat at the table for talks on ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Barrot said that the meeting would be a working session that should not be over-dramatized.
Les confirmations sont en train d'affluer. Je veux pas vous faire de...
Finland's president has called for the rearming of Ukraine and for the international community to exert maximum pressure on Russia through sanctions and asset freezes. Alexander Stubb and other European leaders speaking in the final day of the Munich Security Conference sought to firm up how the European Union can move from talk to more action and stay relevant in Washington's push to stop the fighting. Stubb said he supported the idea of Ukraine becoming a NATO member if Russia were to attack again in the future.
So that Ukraine begins these negotiations from a position of strength.
The Latvian president has reiterated the need for Europe to be part of a potential Ukraine peace negotiation. He said during a panel discussion together with the Finnish president and the prime ministers of Croatia and Iceland, if Europe is supposed to take some responsibility, Europe must sit at the table as well. The comments at the Munich Security Council conference come from a day after Donald Trump's Ukraine envoy said that Europe wouldn't have a seat at the table for Ukraine peace talks.
If we are supposed to take some responsibility, Europe must.
Russia has claimed that its forces had captured one more settlement in Ukraine's Donetsk region, while Ukraine reported repelling Russian attacks in multiple directions. The Russian Defense Ministry has announced its forces seized Berezivka in Donetsk and repelled multiple Ukrainian attacks while launching offensives in Kharkiv, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Zaporozhye. It also struck Ukrainian military sites and downed 130 drones. Ukraine's military reported 176 battles on Saturday, saying it repelled Russian attacks in several directions and targeted Russian positions with air, missiles, and artillery strikes. Well, that's almost all we have time for, but let's recap the main headlines this evening. The African Union Summit's final statement condemns Israel's war on Gaza, accusing it of committing genocide against Palestinians. The Lebanese Ministry of Health condemns kidnapping of 2 paramedics by the Israeli occupation forces. And as we've just been hearing, France will host a European Leaders Summit on the Ukraine war and regional security tomorrow. And that's all for our news this hour, but don't forget to follow Q News wherever you are on social media, from YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News. Good night.